All right, my friends, on today's episode, kind of a different type of episode. The end of an era, the beginning of a new era. Welcome to the ultimate crowdsourced personal finance show. This is ChooseFI.
You're listening to ChooseFI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. ChooseFI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, guys, very excited to dive into this week's episode. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm doing quite well. So yeah, you left all of us with a cliffhanger there, the end of an era. Do tell more.
Well, man, I tell you what, if I had actually not given you the heads up, that would have been really, really cold. All right, so everyone, let me just rip the Band-Aid off real quick. I am going to be taking a step back from the show on the podcast here. And so, been talking about this with Brad for a long time. We just have some family stuff coming up, just have some time commitments that really are pulling me in a lot of different directions. And it just felt like the right thing to do and the right time to do it. So, Brad, obviously give you a chance to react to that as well, but just wanted to have an episode where we really kind of reflect back because we've been doing this now, buddy, for like 5 years. 5 years. Yeah. And the financial independence community is obviously much greater than the sum of us talking on this podcast once a week. But at the same point, it's really been cool to be here for it. As in some ways, you've kind of seen it capture the world's imagination at a worldwide scale.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride, certainly, over the last, Jonathan, it's almost 6 years, actually. Wow. Almost 6 years ago today, basically, was when you reached out to me to get lunch, and you were somebody I didn't know. Yeah, a few short months later, we started the podcast, and like you said, it's been almost 6 years of continuous recording, and it's wild.
I think we had done more episodes within 3 months than Brandon Mad Fientist has done over the last decade. He's still releasing them occasionally. He just had a different pacing schedule in mind.
Yeah. Oh, good old Brandon. And he'll certainly be back on the show very, very soon, which is great. But yeah, obviously you're not going anywhere. Nothing bad's going on here. This is just a season of life, right? I mean, we've been recording this podcast week in, week out, never ending for 6 years. And as our good friend Jillian Johnsrud says, there are seasons of life. And, this is just a time for you to take a step back. And yeah, I mean, for me, obviously, it's bittersweet. We've had a heck of a lot of fun and just been this weird alchemy. I don't know what it is that you and I just are great at talking together on this podcast. And it's been just a ton of fun. It's been quite a journey.
I am a much better conversationalist with you than I am in your absence. No one else is that entertained by my conversations. They usually end up becoming solo monologues. But with you, I get a lot of genuine laughs and even a few courtesy laughs when the joke falls flat. I mean, it's just been a privilege to talk with you over the last several years.
And more genuine laughs, certainly.
You can always tell when it's courtesy laugh. Like that one you guys just heard, courtesy laugh.
Yeah, that was courtesy. Clearly courtesy.
And you learn to tell the difference.
Fine. Yeah. So obviously bittersweet on some senses, but like you said, it's the start of a new era. So that's what's cool is, as weird as this sounds, I guess, the on-air podcasting is kind of my show now. And I just have to kind of figure out where it's going to go, where I'm going to take it, what's going to change. Probably most things are going to stay the same, but do I bring back random things from the past? Like, does the hot seat come back that people love?
Oh my goodness, the hot seat. Gonna bring back the hot seat.
Yeah, hey, you never know. You never know. And clearly, let's just say from the outset here, that none of the changes, if I do bring things back, or if I make wholesale changes or even minor changes, it's not like Jonathan was holding me back or Jonathan made some decision. I want to get that out in the clear. Every decision we've ever made is a co-decision, but that's fun. Like I can do things. Who knows? I might do a Jeopardy style thing where I bring in new co-hosts, and there might eventually be a new co-host of ChooseFI. I might just have guests to bring on, almost like with Doc G a couple weeks ago, where that wasn't an interview. That was just a conversation amongst friends.
It was really good, man. That was a fantastic conversation. Enjoyed listening to that. And I think this platform has become something really special over the last 5 or 6 years. It's a kind of a chance to share in this episode, maybe what it was, what's happened over the last several years, but then also, give you guys a chance to kind of hear what we're thinking about it being going forward with this, kind of inflection point that we're hitting right now. So, Brad, why don't we actually maybe start a little bit with, the last 5 years, just kind of catch people up if you think about, phase one effectively of what this thing is, and then maybe use that to bridge into what it's going to be. I was thinking, as you were saying the hot seat, I realized there's so many new listeners. There's probably at least some person listening right now that doesn't know what the hot seat is. It's been that long, and Jonathan's been holding it back for so long.
Yeah. Damn it, Jonathan. Come on, man. And no, it's not nearly as cataclysmic as and important as we're making it out to be. But it's just a fun little cute segment that I think people liked. And yeah, like you said, kind of going back to the first 5 or 6 years, I think it's interesting to look at the evolution of the FI community. And I think maybe where we've had a stamp on things is, when you and I first found the financial independence community, there was a very different sense of it. And a lot of this was unfair, but regardless of fair or unfair, how things are seen, how things are perceived is reality, whether we like it or not. And the perception at that point was, this is a club. This is for white males in their 30s making a decent bit of money and in tech jobs. And I mean, that's a ridiculous perception. But I think it's because a couple of the famous bloggers at the time kind of fit that bill. And that's what people thought. And it was easy. It's always easy to write people off, right? It's always easy to write off people because, oh, they're some other. I think that's what humans do, that a lot. We otherize people. And it's easy, again, to say, oh, I could never do that. That's for somebody else. I could never do that. Even when that thing is going to make your life so much better, right? And I think, Jonathan, that is the thing that I'm probably proudest of from ChooseFI is we have made this, and we have tried really hard to make it just seem accessible, seem like something everybody can do, everybody can benefit from day one. And I think that's the important thing is FI is not binary. It's not you're 0, you're not at FI, or 1, you're at FI, and nothing good happens until you get to that 1 of being at FI. I think the benefits, and I would argue as vociferously as possible, that the benefits of FI start from day one, from that first time you make a positive change in your life and start down that path of identity of, I'm the type of person that, ... is going to make changes to make my life better, certainly in the financial realm, but also, Jonathan, as we've talked about, in every aspect of life.
Vociferously. I had to look up to see if that was a relative of the velociraptor. For people out there listening, I actually spelled it correctly, in a loud and forceful manner. And yeah, I think you should. I think you should be loud and proud to say, this is what I'm pursuing and this is why I'm pursuing. And I think that why of financial independence was a really big inflection point for us as a community, is to really be able to espouse, there you go, dropping another one back on you there, to be able to espouse why it is that we're doing what we're doing. Why is it that we're making different decisions? And even, it doesn't really matter what other people think, but your why of FI needs to be very clear to you. And whether you ever give this elevator speech to someone else or not, probably will happen, your ability to say that out loud to yourself and create that internal monologue is what keeps you going. If your why of FI is not very strong, then when something else pops up, shiny object syndrome, it's going to get lost in the noise.
Yeah, Jonathan, it has to be that you were running towards something, not running away from something you hate. I think that's another thing that was part of that previous perception of FI, was this is just very simply, I will do anything I can to get away from this job or this life that I've devised that I absolutely hate. And most of it revolving around the jobs, that people would do anything. They would deprive themselves to any degree if they could just get away from that. And then there was no thought of what's on the other side. What am I doing this for? What am I running towards? What is my why of FI, right? What are we doing here? What do I want my life to look like? What lights me up? Who do I want to spend time with? What am I going to pursue, right? Because as we've talked about with mastery, autonomy, all of these things, right? Humans crave progress. And we have to be doing something. Like, no aspect of this, in my estimation, is running towards a life of just pure leisure where you're sitting on a beach sipping umbrella drinks. I cannot imagine many humans that being their ultimate goal. And none of the people that I've spoken with who are pursuing FI or have reached FI have that as their ultimate goal, because that's a pretty empty existence. And obviously, to each their own. If somebody wants to do that, great, that's fine. But for me, it's about, what am I doing this for? And I guess the ultimate answer that I came to was, especially when I was going to the office every single day from 8 to getting home at 5:30, which is not that bad in the cosmic scheme of things, I guess, but which is sad. But it was, I want to spend more time with my family. I have young kids. I'm not going to see them grow up. And that was just something that, that why got me over any of the perceived deprivation. And, frankly, I never had much of that. But if it was in service of being there for my girls, then there was essentially nothing I wasn't willing to do, right? Because that, no aspect of, hey, I'm not going to go out for drinks with my buddies, or Laura and I are not going to go to Ruth's Chris twice a year. Like, who cares? Because there's something bigger in mind here.
I certainly, love your why of FI, and, with young kids myself, it's definitely a big driver for me. I remember when I was encountering, the financial independence community, and I was comparing that in my own mind with, what personal finance meant generally. I remember kind of thinking through this concept that, like, personal finance, it's a good ground game, but it's extraordinarily defensive. It's all about, hey, after you get to the point where your body is broken and feeble and whatever, with the crumbs you have left of your life, will you be happy, safe, and secure? It's really like, are you going to end up in a nursing home with nobody to come and visit you? Fear, don't want that. Make sure you save your 10 to 20% over XYZ. I'm sorry, it's bleak. But the idea was that this normal personal finance defensive message was all about protecting 65 and beyond. If you put your time in and give all your best energy to your employers over this time, and as long as you do that, and then you follow these ground game rules, 65 and beyond will be okay. You're going to be okay. And kind of stumbling into this concept, people said it's just a function of math. Here's the math. And if you implement this and push the limits of it, it's not just 65 and beyond. It's actually, you could reclaim, you could hit that same option tree in your mid 30s, early 40s. That was incredible. I mean, that was tangible. It wasn't like a short-term hit, but it was a intermediate win that I was like, okay, I can make strategic moves and I can unlock decades of, effectively decades of freedom, decades of flexibility, decades of choice. And it turns out, as you were saying, Brad, just to come back to that again, it's not binary, it's not continuous. In fact, as you layer on the concepts that we talked about over the last 4 or 5 years, and some of the ones that we're going to go over today, you're unlocking freedom, with each step that you go down this path, whichever the 1%, the aggregation of marginal gains, that idea of 1% incremental improvement continues to allow you to not just say, oh, I got to flee, whatever. Oh, where am I? But actually to calibrate and say, where do I want to go? And I tell you, it's really hard to not know, you don't know what you don't know. That's like a fundamental truth. So if you surround yourself by people that are just 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, that are making these really interesting choices, you can calibrate around, steal like an artist. Here are these just little elements that you see. Wow, look what this life choice unlocked for them. Look what this life choice unlocked for them. What were the common patterns that allowed them to make that choice? Because it seems so unattainable for me where I am right now in this paycheck to paycheck lifestyle. And you can start continuing to move down that roadmap and just get more and more options along the way. That was the power of saying, great, here's the math. But when you have math plus community, you get a replicable roadmap, and that you don't know what you don't know can get thrown out the window because you can lean on the common experience of the tribe that you've assimilated into.
Yeah, I love that about, like, the Jonathan dystopian reality, right? Of which is accurate, of looking at, hey, what did the outlook of personal finance look like before FI? And as you said, it really was this dystopia of, hey, I'm saving essentially so I'm not eating cat food when I'm 70. that's not really messaging that's going to light somebody up when they're 18, 22, 25, right? Like that doesn't resonate because it just seems so far away and it seems so unrealistic and you can't imagine that your life isn't going to turn out great. Like, so, I mean, frankly, it's just bad messaging. But I think what we in the financial independence community has turned around and said, this is saving money for freedom and autonomy. And to take back your one non-renewable resource, which is your time. Jonathan, as you said, like to the outside world, the FIRE movement, quote unquote, financial independence, retire early, which I think we've tried to get rid of as much as possible.
We do keep saying the fire is spreading, so we can't totally absolve ourselves from this branding.
But as I always say to you, it just sounds so cute. It's hard not to. It's hard not to get rid of that. But really, like that, hey, you can retire in your 30s or 40s. I think obviously that is very attractive to many, many people and is still a huge drawing point. But I think it's expanded beyond that to, as you said, it's just math, right? This is available for anybody because it's just math. When you look at it and you say, hey, I'm going to save 50% of my income, it doesn't matter if you're 18 or you're 50. If you're starting at the same point, in essence, where let's, for argument's sake, say you have $0 of debt at 18 or 50, and you're going to save 50% of your money, you're going to reach financial independence in about 14 to 17 years. So obviously, we could also talk about the benefits of compounding and yada, yada. Of course, you'd rather start early, right? Like I'm not an idiot. I'm not arguing otherwise. But for somebody starting at 50 or 70 or whatever age in between, and you're going to start saving a significant percentage of your income, you're going to reach FI in about 15 years. The most important aspect of that is not the stupid math. It's how hopeful that is. Because as you said, Jonathan, it seemed unattainable. Not FI necessarily, but just any aspect of succeeding financially in those old days, the old media days of, hey, you're just saving for retirement to not eat cat food. Anything better than that seemed unattainable because that's the drumbeat. We were told it was unattainable. But you and I have said repeatedly, this is attainable to anybody if you just take action, right? And you take these small actions over and over again, consistently over years into potentially a decade or two, your life is going to be dramatically transformed.
We had an alternate title for our, ChooseFI book, and we were thinking about calling it, how to plan your personal finances in a way that will guarantee you don't need to eat cat food. It did not end up making the final list or the final cut, but I'm telling you, it was close.
Cutting room floor.
Cutting room floor. You made this point around, we have to, if time is our most precious, non-renewable resource, one of the goals of financial independence, once you get past the math, what it's doing is it's allowing us in a replicable way to start to weaken the link between our time and our money, to separate our time from our money. If you think about the saying, time is money, and through the lens of an indebted life where you're, potentially in many cases, literally up to your eyeballs in debt, and you have a debt forecast that will take you many decades to pay off, you may never come out of debt. That's like a societal norm. And on top of that, all of your best energy to try to beat this, the normal path, all of your best energy just goes to advancing, a career goal to hopefully get a very predictable raise, year after year to allow you to catch up to that debt burden. Time is money, and you're running out of both. That's kind of like this normal societal script that you fall into when you don't recognize the traps of the debt burden early on. A lot of these earlier decisions combined with the promise of the hedonic treadmill consumption lifestyle. And so this is why, like, as we start to really think about this relationship between time and money, we start to think about how to separate it. We're effectively trying to create this, Brad, I don't think we've really used this term in a while. We're trying to create this perpetual money-making machine.
Yeah, that's a phrase that we have loved for a very, very, very long time. I think brought to us originally by Joel from FI 180, way at the beginning of the podcast. And yeah, before I get into that real quick, I wanted to just touch on something you just said. And it brings up to me this concept of there has to be a purpose of work other than just, in essence, as morbid as it sounds, like just running out the clock on your life. That's sadly because people don't have a plan. They don't have any kind of system. They don't understand there's a different way. And I think that's what we in the FI community have really awoken in tens of millions of people is there can be a different way. There can be a better path. There can be a more optimized path. And it truly starts from saving money, right? Because there has to be a purpose of that work other than just clocking in, clocking out every day for the next 40 or 50 years. Like, what is the purpose of that? As we've said, in most cases, you're making yourself feel a little better by buying a fancy car or a bigger house that you don't get to enjoy or live in because you're working all the time to pay for it. That to me seems like the definition of insanity. It seems ridiculous to do that. And to, again, that non-renewable resource of your time. Like, guys, this is not a dress rehearsal. It really isn't. Every day that goes by is a day that is not coming back, very simply. And that doesn't mean, obviously, that we can't all maximize every day. I'm not arguing that, right? If you look at the last couple of weeks of my life, like, they've been great, but like, would I argue they've been the full maximization? Like, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about there has to be some other side. There has to just be something better than, hey, that 5 days of vacation and the BMW. And that's essentially all I have to look forward to next year and the year after that and the Groundhog Day after that and the Groundhog Day after that, right? If you're going to work with a plan of, I'm going to save 30, 40, 50% of my income plus, and I can completely transform my life in 10 or 15 years. Okay, well, that sounds very different because those years are going to go past and you're going to blink and you're going to wake up and it's going to be 12, 15 years later, no matter what. Would you rather have started on that path to FI at day zero and be there when you blink? Or would you rather just be in the same spot that you were going to be in otherwise, which is, for many of us, mired in debt? And like I said, sure, you had that nice vacation once a year and maybe you have a fancy car, but you don't really have anything else to show for it.
And the thing is, it's not like you're choosing, all right, well, I got to pick deprivation and this outcome in 20 years, or I can just do what I'm doing right now and then maybe it'll be okay, but probably won't. But it's, it's like the cost of action is too. That's not the choice. It's not the choice like miserable 20 years versus not miserable, but not a great outcome. That is a false choice. You need to, like, in that thinking right now, you can win all along the way.
Jonathan, that is so brilliant. It is not choosing deprivation. It's choosing just being a little bit smarter. It's choosing an optimized path. And I think that's what we have done really well is like, okay, what are those small changes you can make that have an outsized return? We talk about travel rewards all the way back from episode 9. And actually, I have a refresher on travel rewards coming next week, which should be really great. And it's just, how can you take 1 or 2 free or close to free vacations every single year, right? So I talked about that kind of never ending version of, hey, maybe I get a week vacation and a fancy car. Well, nobody's telling you on the path to FI, you're not going to get a week vacation. I think you could get 2 or 3 weeks of vacation or more to amazing places for spending very little money by being intentional, right? And Jonathan, you're chuckling because it's so true.
Listen, I've mentioned my brother a couple of times and I'm very proud of him, but literally as we're recording this right now, he is flying to Latvia and he is going to be doing an internship to learn how to do timber framing without power tools. And I think it's just something he found out as an internship opportunity and he's got a flexible, work environment and he can do that sort of thing. And I was like, all right, well, isn't the trip going to be expensive? He's like, well, I found a way to get a flight for, it's going to be around $500. And I was able to use travel rewards for that. So it didn't cost me anything. This dude is unlocking incredible options. He's living his most FI life ever right now. It's absolutely insane. But that doesn't sound like deprivation. It sounds like interest-led learning, paired with doing things just a little bit smarter.
And creatively, Jonathan, creatively. That's what's cool is like when you unlock that creativity inside of you, you can find fun things. Like it feels like winning. That's what FI is to me. It feels like winning at life. It feels like, and I've said this so many times, like I am living the same middle or upper middle class lifestyle as anybody else around me. But yet I, certainly during my working years, I was saving 50% of my income plus or minus and living the same lifestyle. I'm rolling in abundance. So there's zero aspects of deprivation, but yet, again, I was on this path to FI. That is fun. It's creative. It's coming up with novel solutions. It's, in my case, working together with my spouse as a team of how can we look at situations and get the most out of them while being a little bit smarter. Like being intentional about your life is actually fun because the alternative is that sleepwalking because we just don't know any better.
And Brad, the key to this is you made that decision, you figured out how to live a slightly more optimized path. And by doing so, you were able to put, really an incredible percentage of your income aside. And I think one of the things that we have done a much better job over the last, 4 or 5 years versus maybe like on day one or even the first 5 or 6 episodes of the podcast is talking about the different ways that you can create that perpetual money making machine. And people have kind of opened their eyes to some of the different possibilities that are out there, because while the outcome is the same, we want to get to the place where our money is working harder than we are and it's producing income that can support us for the rest of our lives and maybe have something left over for our heirs, if that's a goal. The way that we can do that is as varied as the people that are doing it. And to be able to go and find these individuals and highlight their stories and really get experts to come in to tell us what we missed in our first 25 passes has been invaluable.
Yeah, you're right. And I just one jumps out to mind is when we did our original Pillars of Phi, we didn't include entrepreneurship at all, right? And our good friend Alan Donegan, who has become a good friend, reached out to us and said, "Hey guys, I think you missed something." And that has really become such a fundamental aspect of what we talk about here is creating these businesses, being an entrepreneur, just having the entrepreneurial mindset. I think is really, really important. And that's just something that, frankly, I missed. I was just a regular working Joe. And sure, I had some entrepreneurial kind of thoughts, but it was never that pillar. For me, it was always just, okay, I'm going to have my W 2 job. I'm going to save my X percentage of it, and I'm going to reach FI in a number of years. And that was kind of the end of it. And I think that has opened my mind. I mean, just things of, if I could go back and do it differently, like Jonathan, one that I love is house hacking. I think that is an astonishing one, and we talked about that with Scott Trench and Chad Carson amongst many others. And just buying a duplex and living in one side, renting out the other side, or buying a triplex or whatever, and essentially having your living costs, your largest line item of your budget, just essentially zero or close to zero, or maybe even to the positive, frankly, right? We've seen people do that. And just like a really cool rethink on your living expenses. How can you do it a little more optimized, right? Could you do it right when you get out of college? Could you buy a place? It doesn't even have to be a duplex. Just rent out bedrooms to your friends. And for many people, they were just living in college in dorms and close environments. And it's fun to have people around, especially when you're that age. And you might wind up having a better living environment than just, oh, I'm an adult, I'm going to go get my own 1-bedroom apartment and et cetera, et cetera. Get a 5-bedroom house, rent out 4 bedrooms. You're probably going to pay $0 for you, and you have a better environment. Like, I don't want to get into the weeds of that, but like, Jonathan, that's just something that always jumped out to me is, man, it would have been really cool if.
Well, one of the things that stood out to me, going back to the old episodes, was really one of the first ones. So we have all of these ideas that we've seen and been able to talk about on the show, and the ways that people are accomplishing this goal of building this perpetual money making machine, but they can be broadly broken up into 3, categories. And every idea that I've ever encountered will fall pretty neatly into one of these 3 categories. And so let's just go through them quickly. As you're trying to create this money making machine, disproportionately, we put an emphasis on buying, shares of companies or buying companies' debt. So buying stocks, buying bonds. Your actual mechanism for that could be, buying the index, low cost broad-based index funds. It could be, as you go down, you get kind of more specific, buying actively managed mutual funds, buying dividends, buying individual shares. People fall into different strategies. And certainly if you've listened to the, our broader episode catalog, you'll find, maybe preferences inside the community towards one of those or another. As you keep going down that list, though, so you have, I guess you could call it paper assets. It's not like a great word, but, stocks and bonds and, the level of diversification, it's a continuum. But I would just add on to that, just because I can't help myself. One thing to watch out for with that was, and the FI community did an excellent job talking about this, was what are the helper fees and what are those expense ratios? Because that's a fact. returns may vary. Those helper fees and expense ratios will persist. And I think highlighting that really kind of allowed people to filter their energy and their investigation into what strategy they wanted to use, around kind of what was their fixed cost, regardless of the performance of the funds. I think that's a great idea generally. So at the top level, we just covered that. Then the next layer of that is real estate. So Brad, what you just mentioned would fall neatly in that category, and individuals that, like an amazing way to get into it, as you mentioned, is house hack. You're going to be able to get the same mortgage rates that you would have been able to get for your own single family residence, especially if you're living on the premises. You're going to qualify for the lower loans. And I realize that's a relative term. 2022 has been kind of maybe a little bit of a year of resentment when it comes to interest rates at the moment, but still you are going to get preferential loan rates on a residence that you are staying in. And if you are able to find good tenants, obviously you're able to take something that's just a pure cost. It's a expense for everybody else, and maybe turn it into something that's net even or even profit, while at the same time reducing one of your core structural expenses. There are people that have killed it with single family, houses that they rent. There's families that have bought a house, lived in it, rehabbed it, and then refinanced it and moved on. And there's individuals that have gone kind of into scale, mom and pop apartment complex rentals. And we've seen, people have success with all of those. And one of the strategies when it comes to thinking creatively, Brad, we just recently had Coach Carson on talking about how are you going to structure and arrange these loans? How are you going to find the money to do this? And really being able to, whenever you hit a problem, and there will be a reason you can't. What would it look like if you could? Well, someone else had bumped up against this. What did they do? And again, that's the power of you don't know what you don't know. And I didn't know until we started to bring individuals on that did. And not just in the past, not just like 10 years ago. And actually, Brad, that was kind of and I'm going to keep going to my third one here, but that was actually one of the reasons that, I pitched you on doing this podcast. I know Mr. Money Mustache and Brandon Mad Fientist were able to reach financial independence in 2010 and 2008, but we're starting in 2017. Is it still possible? Does it still work? And, spoiler, it does. Moving into the third category that Alan really highlighted for us, and it's so obvious, it was just a blind spot, is entrepreneurship. So, stocks and bonds, real estate, and entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship can take many different forms. It can take a skill that you already possess, or maybe that you already do for a career, and moving into freelancing. It can take a skill that you possess and teaching others as a course. So instead of going to get permission from some college institution to teach it, you just go straight to the end user and you sell it direct. It can be, facilitating some sort of service online. It can be basically aggregating skills and looking for ways to deliver a product in many different ways. And I think about Alan Donegan highlighting people that have started businesses without going into debt. I think about Nick Loper from Side Hustle Nation looking at, relatively low cost side hustles that people have been able to do. And we've just seen hundreds of them on this show as well. It's one of those things that until you see, like, every business has a core framework. There's like it doesn't matter what thing or widget that you do, behind the scenes, a business has a replicable model. You need to, find your customer. You need to establish what your product is. You need to market your product. You need to have an opportunity to sell your product, and you need to deliver the product. And then you need to, be able to get feedback and use that feedback and testimonials to be able to create more users, more individuals that would, potentially be lookalike individuals that would be interested in it as well. Oh, this is the type of person that really gets value. How can I find more of those? Every business is going through this, and the ones that recognize that common framework are able to advance their businesses much faster. And those that don't have a business, but also recognize that framework, are able to get jobs very, very easily with those that do, and so you can become an entrepreneur and become very good at kind of that whole process, or you can just identify here the pain points of every business. Here's a place where I could really have an impact, like lead generation, ads, et cetera, like, building out a platform, building out product delivery, et cetera. And you become really good at that, and you can feed yourself for life just by being good at solving this one problem. And so this kind of brings us to this larger framework, Brad, of, if in that realm of really stumbling on this idea of skills versus degrees, ultimately, nobody actually cares about your degree. They don't actually care about it. Now, they might need it as a qualifier. They might like to have it, but ultimately, and I know someone's going to push back and you can't get this job. Yeah, you're right. But still, ultimately, all that matters when you're getting a job is, can you do the job? Can you do the job? And you can go down this whole rabbit hole, but that was kind of this thing of skills versus degrees. And all of these three categories, stocks, real estate, entrepreneurship, they give you opportunities to learn various skills. And if you can recognize that, it then continues to unlock flexibility with the roadmap that you're building for yourself when you recognize that the goal is not pina coladas on a beach. I mean, maybe for 2 weeks, maybe for a Red X month. You're not going to be happy 10 years from now if all you unlocked was pina coladas on a beach.
That is very, very true. And yeah, as you're saying, it's skills, the upside of skill is what problems can you solve? That's the end goal. Like you're saying, it's can you do the job? It's really what problems can you solve for whoever, either for yourself as an entrepreneur or for someone else that is hiring you in some way, shape, or form, right? What can you do for them? How can you help? How can the skills that you have, not some piece of paper, what are the actual skills you have that can solve problems? So I think that, Jonathan, that's something you have been really hitting on for a long time, to your great credit. And I know, obviously, I was very, very, very pro college, and I'm certainly and will always be very pro education. So that is a total non-negotiable, obviously. And hopefully anybody listening to this understands that from both of us is education is important, whether the college industrial complex is the best way to go about it. That is very, very, very arguable. And I think you personally have done a very good job of arguing just that.
You never want to say with absolute dogma what your kids are going to do, but I would say I'd be kind of surprised, if they go to college at this point. Like that's the place that like nothing that I have experienced or seen over the last 4 years. And I know this is not your position, so I'm not projecting this on you. I'm just saying, as the head of my household, partner with my wife on making these decisions, she is very sympathetic to the case that I have made over the last 4 years. And now having seen, and while I would just say parents like, well, your kids get to make their own choice. Absolutely. Absolutely. But you don't think you have any influence on that decision?
That's true.
You don't think that your desire for your child to go to college since they were born and became part of your family, you don't think that your desire for them to go to college had an influence on that decision? And conversely, if your feelings are maybe not the same, you don't think that that would have an influence on that decision? Anyways, it's an individual choice. And I actually saw a great thread in the ChooseFI Facebook group that was talking about, hey, should I go to college? Should my son go to college? And I was really impressed by the balance of the conversation. There were some individuals making a case for it, but nobody was saying it was a slam dunk. And on the other side of that, nobody was hammering individuals for saying they would go to college. It was a balanced conversation around the pros and cons. And I was like, this looks like a community that has really started to think about it. And it is not as clear an ROI as it was 20 years ago. It's not as obvious. So one of the things that, I think as a community, the messaging has gotten really good on is thinking about the ROI of these massive life decisions that potentially have, approaching $100,000 of debt plus behind them. And if you don't think through that and you just accept, well, they will approve you for the loan and college is always a great decision, your child or you are saddled with that decision for decades, absolutely decades. And so, to have a community that is now having an ROI-based conversation around this, if a college cannot prove out ROI and they're not even trying, in fact, they're hiding it, you should withhold or deny your money from that. Unless I just think you should. I mean, you can put all sorts of caveats on that, but like there should be an ROI for a multi-year 6-figure decision. You would not accept a 0 ROI, on anything else. Why would you do it for just the college experience? My thoughts.
Yeah,
Still feel just
you.
as strongly as I did 4 years, more strongly, more polarized, more strongly.
Yeah, but hey, that's certainly okay.
Yep.
And that's the cool thing, like you said, about that discussion in the Facebook group, right? This is a respectful community, which is rare in the online world these days. And even when you disagree, you don't have to be disagreeable. That's the nice thing, right? And the other beautiful part, and we envision this from day one, is this is a crowdsourced show and it's a crowdsourced community, right? And you asked before, hey, does this still work? Is the question some people might have been asking about FI just even many years ago. And I think what we have tried really hard and what we've hit on is the world runs on stories, right? And one of the beautiful aspects of having so many hundreds of guests on the show is we get to hear all these various stories of people who started in different spots, right? We had Zach a couple weeks ago who, to his great credit, did everything right from essentially the very beginning. And I mean, he has an amazing path. We have our friend Deanna, who was on a few years ago, who was on a very different path and had substance abuse issues into her 40s and then changed her life dramatically. And she is on a remarkable, remarkable path today and everything in between. To me, that is what is so beautiful about really that larger question, Jonathan. Does this still work? Which really means, will this work for me?
As you were even going into that, I realized, so does it still work? Basically means, have things changed to such a degree from the time that the individual, started talking about what it is that they did, that now all the stuff that they talked about is invalid. All right. So I want to say, one, things will always change.
Yeah.
Things will always change. And there will be specific time-sensitive tactics. Like we just talked about the student loan forgiveness. Like this came out this past week with Travis. And I think for individuals, there's an incredible opportunity here, especially if you're in any sort of public service, to have your student loans waived. And, it's going to be situation specific. But Travis on that episode estimated it was around 10% of individuals with student loans would be eligible for these extreme measures that have been implemented right now. So I think, you should listen to that. And you should also probably go check out ChooseFI.com/Travis. You can find out more about what it is they do, and they give you a personalized consult. So my point is, that was time sensitive. Someone listens to this a year from now, are they still going to get the exact same results as someone that listened to this today live gets? No, maybe not. But let's recognize the nature that whenever stuff changes, opportunity presents itself. So for instance, Vicki Robin wrote Your Money in Your Life with Joe Dominguez, and they were doing all these seminars in, I believe, the 70s or 80s. They wrote the book. It came out in the 90s. And at the time that had reached mass saturation in the public, treasury bonds were paying out an incredible, was it treasury bonds or some form,
Something like that.
treasury or tips? There were these financial instruments available that basically locked in 8, 9, 10% return, maybe even beyond. And their whole investing strategy at the time was like, why would you not just do this? Because it just, it guarantees you the result, the outcome that you're looking for. And, someone reading that in the 2010, 2012 would probably laugh at that strategy because, stocks are routinely bringing back 15 to 20%. And inflation doesn't seem to be too bad, just 2 to 3 percentage points. And those same tools that they were talking about were doing nothing. So yes, of course that changed, which is why you would want to be following a community of people that says, hey, here are the facts on the ground at any particular point in time. Lots of things change. Let's keep in mind though, like right now, so okay, we're seeing inflation go back up. Right now, there's I bonds that are available that are, Brad, right now, the current return is 9%. Is it 9%?
Yeah, it's over 9. I think 9.62. Don't quote me on that, but it's somewhere right in that vicinity.
It's an incredible opportunity. And at the same time, does it still work? Some things work better. People in the past were talking about, house hacking and then making your house hacking more powerful by getting a house hack right next to where you work so you could bike to work. You can work remote now. I know very few people that have a mandatory commute Monday through Friday. And 2 years ago, that didn't exist. It was everybody. And I maybe you're in a commute. I'm sorry, but you can change that. You can pivot. You can start over in a completely new career. In a matter of months, we've seen that over and over again. You don't even have to take a pay hit in many, many cases. In fact, what we find is usually you end up making more. Someone's like, I'm not at financial independence, but I just want to take like a gap year. Is this going to hurt me? No, not only will you probably get offered a raise to stay, but when you go back in, you'll probably get a much larger raise, to re-enter the workforce in a situation that you get to hand pick. Because to be honest, you probably wanted a gap year because your current job was kind of stressful. All right. So these are options. The remote work has changed everything. You don't need to worry about biking to work. I have a neighbor and they just moved into our neighborhood. And I was just talking to him. And at some point, the question fell, so, did you leave your job and found a new job? No, I'm still working in Boston, Just, it's all remote now. So it's fine. What? So that means you can also apply for jobs that are in these high cost of living areas. In many cases, you're making a salary commensurate with that. And then you're living in a low cost of living area, which in the past, this is unlocking areas of the country that the only downside to living there was there's no jobs available. They have everything except for jobs. Do you realize what that means in terms of this might be a temporary thing. It might change again. if Elon Musk gets his way. or, or Max Gladwell, whatever his name is. He's the only one that's allowed to work remote, from the coffee shop. Everybody else got to go back to the office.
Malcolm Gladwell,
what is it?
the author?
Brad, help me. Malcolm Gladwell just wrote a article talking about how bad remote work was for society. He literally wrote it from the coffee shop that he's been working at remote for the last decade. He got called on it by the person that was like watching him write the articles, whatever. Remote work is amazing. It's amazing. And what does that mean for you in terms of what do I want my life to look at right now? Also, college degrees, entirely optional in the new world that we're moving into and we've done a whole episode on this. So, I know you're raising your hand saying, no, you have to have it to be a doctor. Yes, you have to have it to be a lawyer. Yes, you have to have it to be an engineer. Yep. That's like 3% of all the jobs that are out there. So like, let's calm down on that one. Skills versus degrees are being unlocked right now. And that means that you can start making 60, 70, 80, 90, $100,000 plus within a period of 6 months and not have to go to a 4-year institution, not take out student loan. Do you realize how does it still work really means has things changed? And when you follow that just 1 or 2 steps, has it changed can always work to your benefit if you're on the front end of the curve. If you're watching for it and figuring out, all right, what does this change mean in terms of the opportunities that are now available because I'm surrounding myself with a community of people that are optimizing inside their current limitations and breaking those limitations on a pretty epic basis. This is the power of saying, hey, we're not going to just fail and then, call ourselves a failure. We're going to fail forward. And we're going to design a future and a life that we can get really excited about. Not one that's been parked on the sidelines till we're 65 and beyond, but one that we can start living out right now.
Yeah, and Jonathan, you said a couple of times there, surround yourself with a community of people. And I think that's what we've tried to do here at ChooseFI. That's what I intend to keep doing, certainly on the podcast. That's what we have. We have a worldwide community, truly, right? You go to choosefi.com/local. There are 300 plus local groups in 300 plus cities all across the world, right? We've featured so many hundreds of stories on this podcast, and I want to feature more. I want people to write in, send me an email, feedback@choosefi.com. If you want to be on the podcast, send me a bunch of bullet points with why you have an interesting story, why I should have you on the show, and what we could talk about. Because again, I want to have conversations. I don't want to have interviews. I want to talk to people in the FI community. Send me a voicemail. We still have that. ChooseFI.com/voicemail. Send a voicemail in. I'm going to play a bunch of them. That's what's so cool about this. This is a community of people. And like we said, FI and the benefits of FI are for everyone. It's not for some other they. This is for anybody willing to take action to make their life better. And they can be small actions. We've talked about the aggregation of marginal gains. It's making these tiny 1% changes in your life that add up and compound. You'll hear that word over and over again here at ChooseFI. Compound into something truly remarkable. And it starts from day one. That's the beautiful thing.
I love this. And Brad, I'm really excited to see where you take this, lifelong subscriber here and listener. And just it's so much fun to be a part of this community and see what this community brings together. And that was always the case. It was always about, this virtuous cycle, like, this feedback loop of you put it out into the universe, you hopefully inspire action, and individuals give you their feedback on the actions they take. And that inspires people that are coming behind them. And as a result, you continually raise the bar on what your expectations should be. And that's a good thing. And I think so many of us, we run out of time, we run out of energy, and we just settle. And you don't have to. The only thing about FI is you're not going to accidentally make the choice to pursue financial independence. You're going to need to be intentional. Do not confuse that word with deprivation. It's just intentional. We're not out in the wilderness saying, where are we? We are establishing, a flight path using travel rewards to a destination of our choosing, being willing to be flexible and get off anywhere along the way, that makes sense to the life that we want to build. And it's just so exciting to contemplate what that looks like for a community that, listens to this invitation and says, I want to be a part of that conversation.
Yep, I love it. And maybe we can have you back on for the year-end wins episode here, which is one of our absolute favorite things. So I'll see if I can convince and cajole Jonathan into coming back on. But yeah, Jonathan, this has been truly, truly one of the great pleasures of my life is doing this with you for the last 6 years. And obviously, we're calling this kind of the end of an era. You're not going anywhere. I suspect you'll be back on the show a handful of times here and there when we want to just chat. But yeah, this has been really, truly amazing.
Yeah, we talk every week, and it really has been a blessing in my life and my family's life. So yeah, love you, brother, and to this community, you guys have just been incredible, and you've really welcomed us in this podcast and shared this podcast in such an amazing way, and we hope it continues to be a blessing to you and to your families and even your kids benefit from this path that you have chosen for yourself. So. All right, my friends, let me give you one encouragement. If you're listening to this, you should be a part of the weekly newsletter. It's an invitation. We think about what do you want to get out of the show? You're going to extract maximum value from the show if you're on the weekly newsletter. Brad puts it together each week, and it just is a way of connecting the community. It's really an incredible newsletter, and it's worth having in your inbox. And I say this as someone that just cleaned out the 40,000 unread emails
Nice.
from all the, I'm still getting yours, still open it every week and love it. Go to ChooseFI.com/subscribe to join that. And every week, there's an opportunity for your feedback for something that you took action on. I think it's a great way to lock it in. Can you imagine where you would be just 52 weeks from now if you took action every single week? ChooseFI.com/subscribe. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.